All right. Good evening and welcome to the BS and Beer Show. Of course, BS stands for Building Science. Tonight's topic is a case study twofer. We have a deep energy retrofit to a house and a brewery, which is pretty on brand. As I said, I'm Travis Brungard. I'm in Kansas City. I'm drinking a giant bottle of Jew Brew Funky Farm Smile of Fortune. It's a Belgian Golden Strong Ale. Those who know about the Jew Brew know about the Jew Brew. BS and Beer is an independent grassroots movement to share building science knowledge through local meetup groups and this, our Zoom show. The brew crew and our guests volunteer our time each week to bring you what we hope is fun and informative in terms of this discussion. We would like to thank Green Building Advisor and Fine Home Building Magazine, our media partners, for helping us promote and share the show each week. We would also like to thank our dedicated audience members who help us keep the conversation rolling with comments in the chat box. Tonight, we'll start with the guest introductions and presentation, do a panel discussion. There'll be audience questions and a panel discussion, and we'll wrap up at 7:30 Eastern time. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mike.
Thank you, Travis. I am Mike Maines in Maine. Tonight, I am drinking a Bateau Brewing from here in Gardner, Maine. It's a red ale from my friend Sarah. Very tasty. Just a few technical notes. I don't think we have any non-video participants this week, but if we do, you can hide them if you play around with Zoom enough. I think everybody's familiar with Zoom, hopefully by now, but if you don't know the chat box, we do have an active side discussion going on in the chat box, so find the button at the bottom of the screen, and that's where we collect questions and comments to keep the conversation going. So feel free to post what you're drinking, where you're from, and as the presentation goes, post any questions there, and we'll grab some to talk about after the presentation. A Zoom quirk: please be sure to click all panelists and attendees when you're posting in the chat box. Otherwise, only us panelists can see your comments. Mailing list: Fine Home Building sends out Zoom reminders each week, but it just says it's just a Zoom reminder. If you want to know more about what we're talking about each week, join our mailing list at thebsandbearshow.com or check out Kylie's weekly post at Green Building Advisor. The video recording of tonight's show will be available at Green Building Advisor, and we encourage you to continue the conversation over there. All past shows can be found on YouTube and also through a link at thebsandbearshow.com. An audio-only version of the BS and Beer Show is available wherever podcasts are found. And I will turn it over to Kylie.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'm Kylie Jacques. I'm the senior editor at Green Building Advisor. I'm drinking a big canteen of iced well water, for which I am eternally grateful. Not everybody has that. So for all of these announcements I'm about to make, these are events and podcast kind of recommendations. I'll just put a link to each in the chat box, so you can just follow up there. Skills USA is an organization dedicated to closing this trade skills gap, and they're looking for industry professionals willing to help in June with judging projects. So if you're interested in that, email Bill Robinson, and I'll give you his email address. Mark Willey and Dave Cooper host a weekly show called BS Fridays. We, meaning the brew crew, were recently guests on the show, and I think if you like this show, you'll like that one. Another thing that you might be interested in checking out is the Passive House Accelerator. They're doing a Construction Tech Tuesdays and Global Happy Hour Wednesdays shows. I think you might enjoy that. And Emily also has a podcast that you would likely enjoy. It's called Energy and Efficiency with Emily. And then Jake Bruton, Steve Basic, and Peter Yost are doing something called Unbuild It. And that's, I don't know if it's a podcast, but I think it's a podcast. So check that out. Again, link to come. And for the book club episode, which is on April 1st, we are all reading the Essential Building Science. Let's see. Oh, shoot. I forgot the title of it. Essential Building Science, I think. And then there's more to the title. Yeah. I can't get it to show up, so I didn't even bother. There it is. We'll send you the link, whatever, you'll find it. But what's neat is that the publishing company is offering a 25% discount on the book if you'd like to purchase it. And we hope you will, because we'd like to invite some audience members to join us on that show. And I will give you the code name or whatever it is you need to enter the code, Essential 25, I think it is. But I'll send that to you. I think that's it for me. Who's introducing? Travis, are you introducing guests? Emily's introducing.
I am.
Right.
We're apparently switching roles tonight.
Yeah, so, I know. I got confused there for a minute.
But that's okay. Works for me. Emily Mottram, architect here in Maine. Tonight I am drinking a Spanish Shiraz. Still no beer in this house because I still haven't gone out. But hey, whatever. I know it's sad. BS and beer every week. You'd think I'd get beer. Tonight we have two excellent guests. We have Jesper Cruz, who is the owner of Maine Passive House and the founding member of Passive House Maine. He is a certified passive house consultant and builds and designs passive houses and other high-performance buildings in the mountains of Western Maine. So Jesper, tell us what you're drinking, a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you. I am building the Surf Breeze from Oxbow Brewing Company. It's a farmhouse ale with cranberry, sea salt, and citrus, apparently, and it's delicious. It sounds weird, but it's really tasty. And I really got into the building science to be able to drink beer. So this is a perfect fit.
I think it's really funny that you're drinking that particular beer. One, because you're going to talk about Oxbow, but that started a little thing with Travis and I about sour beers, because I got that one and I didn't realize it was kind of like a sour, and I'm not a sour beer fan. And that started a thing for like several weeks in a row about sour beer. Travis, you would love that. Someday we're going to send you some.
I was going to say, I begged Emily to send it to me when she said, "Oh, I can't stand this." I was like, "No, it's for me. Just send it."
Yeah, it is for you.
So I applaud your beer choice, yes. But
I'll send another one through the portal to you.
Lovely.
Only that worked. And we also have Anna Heath. She is a lead carpenter and project manager of Maine Passive House. She's been working with the company for 3 years and recently piloted a workshop series to teach carpentry to the community at Maine Passive House's newly renovated shop space in Bryant Pond. So welcome, Anna. What are you drinking, and what else would you like to tell us about yourself?
Well, hello there. I'm drinking Paloma Daydream, which is also from Oxbow. We're shamelessly plugging them right now. This one, Emily, you would not like at all. It's grapefruit, sea salt, lime, and agave.
Be still my heart.
It's delicious. And I think this presentation will speak for itself. You'll learn everything about me.
All right. Well, that's awesome. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and kick it off with your presentation. So whoever wants to share their screen.
Okay, so we are going to talk about deep energy retrofits, and we're going to think about them in terms of building in versus building out. And that means, where do we put our insulation? Is it smack on the outside of the building, or are we interrupting our living space and putting it inside? And because we are Maine Passive House, we are building by the Passive House principles. They're listed here. The ones we're focusing on are super insulation, kind of thermal bridging a little bit. We'll talk about it a bit. Definitely air tightness, always air tightness. And I think a little bit of mechanical ventilation. Our two projects, the one I'm going to talk about is Oxbow, the brewery that we helped renovate a new beer garden for in Oxford. That's a 200-year-old barn that we fixed up. And then we're also going to talk about Jesper's personal residence. That's his house right there on the right. And to start off, this beautiful barn has so much history in the community. It used to be a cross-country skiing course, and people could do ski rentals out of the barn. I know close personal friends that lived there in the barn. There were numbers up on the beams for back when the barn used to be a bed and breakfast. So it's got a deep, deep history in the community. And I think naturally we'll start at the bottom and work our way up when we talk about the renovations. First thing we did was we picked the whole thing up and we rolled it out of the way because all it was sitting on was some rocks and cow poop. And there's this really awesome video on the Maine Passive House website. You should check it out. It's all drone footage and you just watch this massive structure just like rolling along. It's so cool. So the first thing we're going to talk about is building in on a frost wall. And this is the inside of the barn after we poured the slab and rolled it back into place. You can see that we actually lifted the whole structure up a little bit higher in order to account for headroom. And so we've got lap joints on posts, and we've got that foam detail on the back wall. You can see where it's white on that back wall, and there's about 4 inches of space unaccounted for between the sheathing and the frost wall. And it was a really, really cool project trying to blend that in and make that look like it belonged. So this is the slab detail. And the thing that we really want to talk about is breaking the thermal bridge between the slab and the frost wall. And that's what that foam was about on the back wall of the barn. And you can see that the foam actually lines up in the plane of the double stud walls that we'll end up building on some of the interior walls. I'd also like to point out there is a little bit of thermal bridging here. This project was run on a very tight budget. We were pushing the energy efficiency as much as we could. And so we figured, let's insulate under the slab while we have the chance. Couldn't convince them to wrap the posts. Couldn't convince them to do the exterior of the frost wall, which we normally do. But we figured the frost wall we can get to later. So we didn't push them on it too hard. Another alternative for the foundation is the concept of building in on the foundation for a full basement. And this kind of design is meant to use cellulose instead of like a more traditional rigid foam board. And the reason behind that is the embodied carbon of the materials. So we actually, that yellow membrane is a heavy duty, like 10 mil or 15 mil plastic called Stego that we just wrap up and cover every single concrete surface, tape it super well. We make sure we've got caulking underneath the walls that we drop in so that there's no way that moisture can get into that cavity. And then we drop a stud wall, and then we put 2x2 battens horizontally to add a little bit more insulation space, but less thermal bridging through those studs. And that allows us to fill that cavity with cellulose and reduce our embodied carbon. A little bit of a digression. We're back to Oxbow now. This is the idea of building in on the walls. It's interesting because this project wasn't a clear-cut, let's build everything in, let's build everything out. Because they wanted to expose the beautiful old barnwood, we were kind of stuck with this combination of both, which makes the air barrier really challenging. In this particular image here, you can see a double stud wall, which is an example of building in. It's a trickier construction. It just means a lot of repetition. You're building the same wall twice, basically, and you've got to make sure everything's framed up square and nice. There are other ways to do this a little bit faster with different materials that Jesper will actually talk about in the building out segment. But we built in on one wall. Normally, we want to put the air barrier on the interior third of the insulation layer for our climate zone anyways. And unfortunately, because we were building in on the wall on the left and building out on the back wall, the only way to possibly do that would be like if we cut a channel right along the double stud wall on that back wall and kind of like wrapped the air barrier behind the beautiful barnwood and then built behind it. So we ended up actually pushing our air barrier to the exterior. And you can see that in red on this slide. We did end up taping it to the foundation as well. And that's how we sealed off the entire thing. We don't typically do this. We usually will try to keep the air barrier to the interior third. But this situation was a little bit different. You can see here the outside of the building, and this is the air barrier that we used. It's a really, really wonderful air barrier, weather-resistant barrier. It also is a, oh gosh, I watched a BS and Beer episode on this, and I'm not going to use the right term. It's a smart vapor retarder, I think,
Yep.
not a barrier.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. And you can see all of the taping detail that goes into this. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of just like attention to detail. You can also see down at the bottom where we've taped it to the concrete. We use a primer, just prime the concrete first. It helps the tape adhere better. And it works in 14 degrees to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. So it can withstand most of our main temperatures, which is awesome. And this is the finished product. And of course, we would build in and build out to get a result like that. You can also see the benches along the back wall. That's how we hid the 4-inch gap with the sheathing and the frost wall and tried to blend it all together. And now let's move to the roof. This is an example of building out. And this is my personal favorite retrofit detail. I think it's just really efficient. In this case, we use TJIs, which are engineered floor joists. And we stripped the whole roof, cleared it back. You can see how wide those boards are. Like they really wanted to show all that off. And it was definitely a little bit wavy, sagging in places. So the TJIs actually provide a really nice structural support for that. It just rigidifies everything. And you can see we laid down our air barrier, screwed in our TJIs to the purlins in the original framing, and then wrapped over the top of them the Mento again, and that got connected to the Mento on the wall. So we have a continuous air barrier all the way around. And you can see here our strapping. We have a double layer of strapping. The first is to provide a rain screen or venting on the roof. And then the second is so that we can attach our roofing. But we actually use the strapping, the vertical strapping, as an opportunity to fur the roof out to even it out so it didn't match the wave of the original roof. And you can see we go from like nothing to 5/8 Advantech to 3/4 strapping. So it was a bit of a mess up there, but I think we figured it out. By the end, it was decently straight. And I wanted to show you this detail here where we've got a double layer of strapping and the Mento, and then we're filling the Mento with cellulose. We end up with some ballooning in the middle. So we put these battens through the middle of that grid pattern to hold it down. And that way, all the penetrations that are along the strapping are protected. All the water drains to the center and it has a way to get through the roof assembly, which works pretty slick for us. Another thing to note is that this project, we wrapped up the roof probably September, and all through October, it was super rainy, and we were worried that the cellulose that was packed in there would get wet. And Jesper cut it open after a month or so, and it was bone dry. So this membrane works phenomenally. It was really, really cool to see. And this is the reason why we built out on this assembly. And now I'll turn it over to Jesper.
All right. Thank you, Anna. So this is my own house. My wife and I built it in 2000. And talk about a shoestring budget. We spent $85,000 originally building that. No frills. And after 15 years, the Brosco wooden windows that we had put in were toast. And at this point, I had started importing windows from Denmark, triple pane windows to use in some of these passive house projects we were building. And I thought, I'll throw some windows in for the south side of my own house, and on the next window order, and we'll put those in. And then I was like, well, we can't really put triple pane windows in a 2x6 wall. It doesn't really make sense. So I was like, we should probably walk the talk and kind of retrofit our house. So in order to make it possible for us with the money that we had, we decided to do one wall at a time, so one wall a year. And that's how we kind of got started to it. It's it's nice that it kind of like spreads out the cost, but it's also dangerous for relationships, should we say, to live in a construction zone for 4 years. It wasn't like total construction zone, but it definitely got old at the end. I will say I am super happy that we did it now. My house is extremely comfortable. It's very resilient. My energy bills are very low. I probably pay like less than $100 a month on average to run the entire house. So what you're seeing here is the house is 2x6 construction. This is actually afterwards. We've been doing this is the tail end of the renovation, but it's 2x6 walls sitting on frost walls with a concrete slab below. And Anna is gonna skip the slide, so I'm gonna do the secret shake here whenever I need the slide. So the first thing we did is we took the siding and we stripped the siding off the bottom of the wall. And then we dug down to the footers of the frost walls. And then we cleared the top of the frost walls. And then we adhered this DA membrane, which is the green membrane you can see in the photo. We adhered that to the concrete foundation, just like Anna did at the Oxbow project. Primed it, taped it. We probably put in some high quality caulking as well. So we did that. And then we put 10 inches of EPS foam on the outside of that. And 10 inches is probably a little overkill, but I had these 5-inch thick sheets left over from another project. So 2 layers of those. And that kind of gets my foundation wall out in the same plane as the Larsen trusses that we're putting on later. We put a little bit of tar paper over the EPS foam to try and keep the ants and critters out of it, although the EPS foam that we're using is treated with borax, so in theory it should keep those pests out of it. So that's what it looked like at first, and this is what it looks like later. I like this secret. Oh, no. Oh, back. Ooh, yeah, left, right. Okay, so that's just what it looks like at the end. So now you can go. So here's the detail. Like I said, 2x6 wall, foam on the outside. So the DA membrane, the green membrane, ends up on the outside of the old 2x6, which is kind of right where you want to have that air barrier. That wasn't a shake. That was just a little thing there, Anna. And then you can see we had originally, when Martha and I built the house, we put 2 inches of XPS foam under the slab. And obviously we weren't going to jackhammer the floor up to put more underneath there. So I was a little concerned about the concrete, the frost wall coming up, thinking that was going to be a thermal bridge. Anna did the therm modeling, and it's actually not a thermal bridge, but obviously it is a break in the insulation, but it's not enough to qualify as a thermal bridge. So now we can move on. Thank you, Anna. All right, so past the foundation, after we do the foundation, then we strip all the siding off the entire side of the house. We take the windows out. We run the DA membrane right over the windows. We go all the way up to the roof. And then for a night there, we'll have just the DA membrane covering our windows, tape it so it's kind of weather tight. Then the next day we go in, we cut out the DA membrane in the old window openings. So we planned it so that the new windows that we're going to put in are the same size as the old windows, minus the window bucks that we're putting in. So after we cut out this membrane in the window openings, we built the window buck. So that's what the zip sheathing that you can see in the window openings. We built that box so it comes out to the plane of the TJIs. We tape the corners of the window buck, and we tape the connection between the window buck and the DA membrane, right? So when we put the window in now, window connects to the to the window buck. The window buck connects to the DA membrane, and that's how it stays tight. And then before we put on the TJI, so the Larsen trusses, we take a little strip of Mento, which is our weather-resistant barrier. We tape it to the DA membrane and we drape it out over the foam, and then we put our trusses on that, so that way we can have our whole wall system ends up being like wrapped on itself, right? So we have the DA membrane on the backside, the Mento that goes underneath, Mento all the way up the face, and then we wrap it up over the top as well. So I think you can skip to the next slide, Anna. So after all the TJIs are on, we block around the windows. We put a little row of blocking along the bottom of the wall. And that is ready for Mento now. So I think you can skip there. We go. We put the Mento on that. All the seams will get taped in this, of course. You know, wire penetrations that are coming out are getting sealed up. And go ahead and skip to the next. Same detail that you saw before. Nothing's changed there. Did you skip? Was there one more slide in there, Anna, or no? Oh yeah, there was. Okay. So I just want to show, so over the Mento, after the Mento goes on, we'll do a rain screen. So we have strapping, 1x3 strapping going over the TJIs, and then horizontal strapping that we can nail our siding to. And then notice in between I should say, by the way, too, that the TJIs, the Larsen trusses, are bolted into the original framing of the house. And then the little skinny battens that you can see in the slide are just to keep the Mento from bulging out and actually end up coming up, pressing against the siding, just to keep that nice airflow. And to the attentive participant, you can notice one mistake we did here. If you're looking up right to the right of the window to the far left, you can see a little round circle, which is the Luna's ventilation system coming out right up under the eaves. And that turned out that's not a good place for it, because there is some extra heat in it when it exhausts in the winter, and that will condense right up under your eaves. So I had to put in like a little metal cap up there so I didn't have icicles hanging off my overhangs. All right, now we can take it to the alternative wall, which is you could build your own Larsen trusses, which a client of ours did. I'm guessing he probably made somewhere between 50 cents and 75 cents an hour building those. They were super cool, beautiful, but not a cost-effective way, I think, to do it. But if you're retired and you have time, go for it. He also decided to insulate it with Roxol, which probably, I think we figured out it cost him as much in Roxol to insulate that as it would have cost him to have it insulated with cellulose by someone else. So, all right, we can skip to the next one, which is just another way of adding insulation to the outside. Could be just adding EPS foam, which is what we did in this. This is new construction, but it's EPS foam, which isn't like a great material, but a better option would have been like wood fiber insulation maybe, but just cost prohibitive on this project here. So
also, just jump in really quick. This is what we did on the building out section of that back wall in Oxbow. It was all EPS foam on that wall.
All right, the roof. This is like where this project got interesting. So you can see here the gray membrane right under the old rafter tails. So that's the DA membrane that comes up, and then that got taped to the Mento, right? So you can see how we're having like each wall is actually sealed onto itself. So if we have a leak one place, it's not like leaking in to the other assemblies. And the reason we wanted to cut the overhangs off is going to be apparent in this next photo. I'm really impressed with your reading my mind here, Anna. That's awesome. So the reason we want to cut the overhangs off is that we can then drape our Mento right up over our roof. And it just makes it way easier to air seal it. somebody once told me it's kind of the comparison is to gift wrap a pitchfork that's in a box compared to gift wrapping a pitchfork that's not in a box. So it's just so much easier when you can wrap it up like a nice little present. And then up at the peak of the roof, because we used to have a vented attic, right, with like vents in each gable. But now that we're wrapping everything, it's a non-vented attic, which is kind of like a no-no. So we cut a bunch of the plywood out up near the peak. And the reason, or the thought behind that is that if there is moisture in the attic, then at least now the moisture only has to make its way through the Mento Plus membrane rather than making it through the CDX plywood and then the Mento. And Mento has a really high perm rating, right? So if there's moisture in there, it's easy for it to get out. Whereas the DA membrane that we have on the walls has like a really low perm rating, so it's hard for moisture to get from the inside of the house into the wall assembly to start with. So now we strap the roof, and so it's venting behind the siding. It's coming up, venting all the way underneath the roofing, and then out in peaks. And you can see we made this special drip edge out of a 24-inch wide flat stock metal, so that we could use the old roofing panels. Because obviously now that we're making the wall thicker, the overhangs get longer, the roofing is not long enough, but this is a way to use the old roofing because it still had some life in it. And originally I was like, great, we got the plywood cut up, I'm all set. But then I did a couple of, watched some presentations at Nessie's conference in Boston, and kind of thinking maybe it's not such a good idea to have this leaky ceiling into my attic and potentially having all this hot, moist air ending up in my attic with no ventilation. So I had 16 inches of loose fill cellulose up there already. So we ended up shoveling that kind of from one end to the other, or from one side to the other. And then we put out smart vapor retarder Intello out over the entire attic, trying to air seal the space. So trying to air seal the attic from the living space. And one thing we did that made it a little bit easier is we cut 12-foot strips of Intello, and we had a little pattern. So we cut these little notches. So when we brought the roll up, we could roll it out and it would kind of fit around all the cross braces. And then if you skip to the next slide, you can see how we then taped that Intello around, painstakingly taped that around each cross brace. And here, like Anna and Matt and myself, we're all gung-ho to go up in the attic, like, yeah, we're going to totally kill it today. This was like probably in May, and it was probably like 120 degrees up there. It was absolutely horrible, but I'm really psyched we did it. I sleep better at night knowing that we went through all of that. All right.
So this is a detail. Jesper was concerned about where the trusses meet the wall, how there's a cold corner there, because we weren't able to expand the insulation there. So we were talking about doing a crown molding with foam. And I did some energy modeling and tried to keep in consideration moisture and all that. And we found that a 2-inch by 2-inch triangle of EPS would provide like enough insulation to reduce the thermal bridge, but not too much to cause moisture in that corner. And you can see a thermal imaging photo from, I think that's in November. And the temperature difference isn't too far off along the edges of that from the interior. So we're okay with it. We are going to try to run some moisture analysis in that corner. We've been prodded after giving this presentation to look into it. So we're going to look into it and try to measure it through either this winter or next. And the only other alternative roof building in strategy really that we use fairly regularly is a drop ceiling. And of course, this isn't super convenient if you're living in the space or if you have interior finishes already done, although it is really convenient as far as if you need to run new electrical, if you need to add new ventilation, and if you want your air barrier within the interior third of the assembly. This is a really easy way to do that. So now I'm just going to touch on mechanical ventilation very briefly. Because we're making these homes so airtight, we need to add some mechanical ventilation. Yespa, do you want to say your favorite phrase?
I have no idea what my favorite phrase is.
Houses don't need to breathe, people do. So we add mechanical ventilation to all of our houses. More traditionally is the ducted ERV, energy recovery ventilator. This will allow for some humidity control, whereas the traditional HRV, the heat recovery ventilator, doesn't maintain humidity as well. We like these units. They run very efficiently, very quietly, although they're really, really hard to put into a retrofit. This is actually an ERV installed in a retrofit. It was amazing. I don't know how he managed to handle like all the duct work that he had to run through his house afterwards, but it's very uncommon that we'll add a ducted system to a retrofit. More commonly, we'll use these units. So this is the one we use more typically. It's Lunos. I actually did just hear the other day that Zender is coming out with a self-contained unit as well. So that's kind of exciting. The nice thing about these is they're completely self-contained. There are two types. One that is in a partnership, and all you really need to do that's kind of invasive to install these is a comm wire that allows the two to talk to each other. And basically, in order to do the heat exchange, one will turn on intaking air for 70 seconds while the other one is letting the air out. Exhausting, thank you. And then after 70 seconds, they'll switch directions. So this one's been preheated as it exhausts. So when the cold air comes in for supply from the outside, it gets warmed as it comes into the house and vice versa. And then there's another unit that we put in kitchens and bathrooms that does all of it through its own self without talking to another person, another unit. They're less expensive. They're not as invasive to install. You just drill a hole in your wall and you put them right into place, but they can be quite noisy. Yes, has some experience with that.
I will say, as having installed more and more of these units and having them in my own house now, I think as it gets really cold, what they say is to either, shut them down to like a really low speed, or just, there are multiple settings that you can set them on. And you can also set it so you can actually just shut it off, because sometimes we would get a little frost in it and you'd hear this fan just go like, dick, 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 like super noisy. Once you found out that there's a way to shut it off, that kind of alleviates that. So, all right. So just talking about insulation. So cellulose is really our go-to insulation material for a number of reasons, right? It's just good, like when you're looking at the building science part of it, it holds moisture well, it's inexpensive, you're actually storing carbon in the wood fiber that you have in there. It doesn't off gas, it's cheap. So, and we have a good install. I think, the key to using cellulose insulation is that if you're dense packing it in walls or in rafters or something like that, you just need to make sure that whoever's doing it know what they're doing, and that it gets dense packed to the 4 pounds per square inch or whatever it is. EPS foam, we use that below grade primarily. I think that one project where you saw EPS on the outside of the wall, we've done that once, but really try to steer away from it. So, it's under the slab on pretty much every project we do. It's on the outside of the foundation walls a lot, but that's about it. it's not as bad as XPS foam, some other stuff, but there is a good alternative now. Glavel or foam glass. I know that Rob Conboy in Vermont, I think, is kind of working on getting a factory up and running. So once that's being produced here in the US, that'll just be so much nicer, right? So it's basically like backfilling your excavation projects with a material that has insulation in it rather than using dirt. So you're getting like, you're backfilling it and insulating it at once with a product that's much better for the environment. And spray foam, we just stay clear of that. Like if you're trying to air seal your houses with spray foam's just, it's like it off gases, and you're relying on, if any kind of wood is twisting or shrinking or moving, which it does all the time, it can easily create like cracks in your otherwise continuous air barrier, and then you're kind of screwed. So then on top of it, it's pretty expensive, and it's not a very healthy product, and it's not good for the environment. So we even stopped using spray foam around the windows now. We just use Roxol to fill the gaps between the windows and the window box, and then we use window tape to air seal it. And if you are doing this kind of energy efficient construction or whatever you want to call it, because you think that it's good for the environment, then you definitely need to pay attention to what kind of materials you're using. This slide, you might have seen it many times before. It's a popular slide these days, but you can see the carbon impact of like extruded polystyrene, the blue styrofoam that you get from the lumberyard is horrible. EPS foam that we use is definitely not as bad, but like I actually see like dense packed cellulose, you're actually storing carbon. Or like a straw bale house is probably like the most environmentally beneficial product you could use. So what I've been told is, and I think that's from like Chris Mackwood, I think, who did this slide here, is that you could actually build a brand spanking new passive house and use like some of these materials that are not very good for the environment. And over the lifetime of the house, it would actually be worse than a code-built house built with less carbon intensive materials. So, saving energy is awesome, but using the right materials is awesomer. The money part. So on my project, that ended up costing us $160,000, and I didn't pay $160,000 because I didn't pay myself and et cetera. But that's kind of like assuming, that the crew that was working on it, it's like kind of, I've taken that into consideration. So, I needed to get new windows anyway, and the siding kind of needed to be changed as well. So you could say like, maybe half of the cost of it needed to be done otherwise. But, it's hard to justify. I mean, my return on investment, I'll never see it. I think, maybe my kids will, but I think the really big things that I got out of this, besides having very low energy bills now, are definitely the comfort. Like the comfort of my home are just like, I can't even compare it to previously. I can sit in my windowsills in like a t-shirt when it's 20 below outside and be just as comfortable as I would be if I'm sitting in the middle of the house. The air quality in the house is amazing compared to like what it used to be. I used to have like water all over my windows and got none of that now. The resiliency, if I lose power, my house won't freeze. It's that. So that to me is definitely worth it, So, but, it might not be the case for everybody. Maybe there's some kind of, I think sometimes, you got to kind of like figure out from case to case, what the best solution is and what's the best solution with your money. I mean, obviously, if you have brand new windows in your house and new siding, tearing all that stuff off to like add insulation to the outside might not be the best solution. All right. And the Oxbow Beer Garden. So that was 172 bucks a square foot for the total cost of the project. And then we've kind of like broken it out with like taking different things out of it. I will say the one thing that was not included in this is all the appliances for the commercial kitchen and the wood-fired pizza oven. But you know, for 172 bucks a square foot for a total God rehab, I think we did pretty well. And I think that might be it.
All right, thanks guys. Good
Later.
show.
Those are beautiful projects, both.
Yeah.
I want to go have a drink at the brewery immediately.
I know, right?
Yes.
The pandemic.
And then
I will say they have actually done an unbelievable job. If you drive by there on a Saturday, there will be like probably 100 to 150 cars there. They have like fireplaces outside, and I mean, the restaurant itself is closed, but they have a takeout window and people are drinking beer outside, and unbelievable.
even now, even
now, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, very nice. I do have to mention that, or I've known Jesper for 10 years maybe, and actually met him through Passive House Maine, not to be confused with Maine Passive House, which is his company. Passive House Maine is our state Passive House group, and we basically started as a very BS and beer like group. So I've had a lot of building science discussions sitting around a table with Jesper. So that was a big inspiration for this. So it's really cool to have you here, Jesper, and it's great to have you here as well, Anna. And I've driven by the beer garden probably at least 100 times in my or my life, but I haven't since you've converted it. It looks really cool. I really like the battens you have. Like, I mean, I've done the infill battens, but I've never overdone them to provide drainage. That's really smart. I was curious about why DA on the interior of your house instead of Intello. Were there reasons for choosing the DA, or things you prefer about DA versus Intello? These are both Proclima brands.
I don't have a good answer to that question.
No? Okay.
I wonder if maybe when we started out, if the Intello might not have been available at that point.
Okay. Is it DA or DB plus? One of them is a wood fiber base instead of a petroleum base. I've been interested in trying it just for that reason. The performance numbers are reasonably comparable to Intello or other.
Yeah, I see Sam Newman says the DB plus is paper based.
Okay, DB
but the
plus.
DA is, I guess it's, I don't know if it's petroleum based, but it's yeah.
Okay.
It's like a perm rating of like 0 or 1 or something, probably 1.
Okay. We have a bunch of audience questions and comments, but anybody on the panel want to have any questions for these guys?
Well, it just so happens, it's just serendipitous that I'm featuring this Jesper's house in the Fine Home Building. The next edition of Fine Home Building magazine is kind of a hybrid between Green Building Advisor content in the print edition of Fine Home Building. And I had to find really, stellar projects that made sense to feature in this particular building science heavy issue. So this house came to my attention independent of this show, and I got on the phone with Jesper and discussed it for that reason. And one of the things that I kind of came away with the idea of it being a very methodical approach to how to beef up an entire envelope, one wall at a time. And I don't know if that's something that you would recommend to people who are interested in energy efficient measures, but don't have a ton to lay out right at the start. You said that you did one wall per year. I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it made you crazy enough that you would never recommend it to anybody, or if it's something that you would recommend.
No, I mean, I think it just kind of depends what your tolerance is for, having ongoing construction going on. But really the one thing that made it kind of a real pain was that we have drywall returns. So, the drywall goes from the walls and then it returns into the window. So when you do one wall where you might have you could have 2 or 3 rooms in your house that are facing this wall, you're doing the drywall returns. That means you're going to have to obviously hang the drywall, mud and tape it, but most importantly, you have to sand it. And when you sand it, that just, it gets everywhere. So it's so disruptive. It basically means you have to empty whatever rooms you have there. And then, you do the next wall on the other side, and you might have in the same room another window on another wall. So that means you're going to have to clean that room out again another time. And so we did the south wall. And then when we moved around to the other side, we just decided not to finish the drywall returns. So for a year and a half, we just lived with these plywood bucks, you know what I mean? And it was just kind of we kind of like to have our house put together and look nice, when people come over, and it's just kind of it looks a little, little ghetto. But the nice thing is that you do one wall, so you can start with a small wall and just do that wall. And it might just take a week or 2 weeks. And then you learn something from that. And then you move around to the other wall. At some point, you're going to have to deal with the roof. So, but the nice thing is you can kind of ease into it. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'd never do it again, but I'm really happy that I'm done.
You would say that we've presented together about deep energy retrofits in the past, and it's always expensive and everything. But someone posted in the chat, were you still married after you were done with this project? So you would do it again, but would your wife do it again? Would your family do it again?
Yeah. Luckily, she's not here to answer that question. So, but I will say we are still married, so and we're still sleeping in the same bed. So.
There you go. Your windows, yes, but I know we've discussed this before. I've actually been to your house. I think you'd finished your first wall, so it was maybe 5 years ago. And I know you had wood framed tilt turn style windows you were importing from Denmark, but they were actually outswing, which I find really interesting because I find it's hard to convince clients who have never seen an in-swing tilt turn that's what they want to have. And so I think and with small houses, in-swings can be an issue also. So I know you're not importing those windows anymore, but can you talk a little bit about windows? Why did you choose the outswings, or what what are your thoughts on passive house windows?
They're really sleek windows. I love those windows. And they're awning windows. So, they just tilt out, which is great. You can have them open in the rain and it doesn't matter. The trickiest part was to come up with a way to have a screen, because where we live, we just have so many mosquitoes and stuff. So we needed to have some kind of screens. Finally, what I came out with that actually works really well is kind of we made a double hung screen that we put into the inside, and you just lift that one part up, stick your hand out to grab the handle to open it, and then you just let it come down again. But in general, what we're using is a bunch of tilt turn windows, from use a bunch of Logic windows, which is, we buy right through a company here in Maine. I think it's, there's so many, back when I started my project, there were not that many options for triple pane windows. Now there's I wouldn't be surprised if there was 100 different windows that you could get now.
A bunch of audience questions. Let's see. Dan Colbert wants to know if you're doing any monitoring on either project, any monitoring in the walls, hydrothermal monitoring. Nope.
I'm not.
A related question. Somebody was farther down the list, but somebody was asking. Todd Spraggins was asking, what modeling tool are you using that takes into account vapor moisture in addition to thermal?
So Woofy is actually does a good job with that. I don't use that software. I actually was using Therm, which is not my favorite. I wouldn't really recommend it, but Therm, and then they have some resources on the what would the website be? Yes, for the German one.
For the
Passive House.
PHI?
PHI,
Passive
yeah.
House Institute,
Yeah. So they had some resources there that explained how to use Therm with moisture. Really, it's just a little kind of like a little indicator on the thing that says your dew point temperature is this, and then you have to plug it into an Excel and hope for the best. So I wouldn't recommend that method. I think there's better software out there.
I think Woofy, right? Woofy Passive.
Woofy does a good job. Yep.
Kind of sounds like
that's what most people are using now.
Yeah. I have to go out of order here and say Steve Bazek says triple glazed windows are a dumb idea, but it's to Armando and they have a little thing, so I'm not sure what the rest of the story is.
He's just picking a fight. He's just picking a fight.
Okay.
He's just picking fights in the chat.
Okay.
I have one more modeling question though. Do you guys do most of your own modeling, or do you have or do several of your projects come to you with the passive house model already done?
Both. When we work with certain architects, we get our passive house model done for us, which is lovely. And when we design our own, obviously we're doing our own, and other architects just don't give us that, and we have to do it ourselves.
And sometimes you get a project, that's so far along that it's pointless to energy model it, because whatever we're going to tell them, it's too late at that point. So I think we probably rely more on details that we know that we've either been modeled by somebody else, or that we have like a track record if we know they're going to work. That's, I think.
Yeah. I might have missed it in the presentation, but did you work with an architect on Oxbow, or did you guys design it yourself?
We worked with an architect.
You did.
Leslie Benson in Portland, Maine.
Oh, right. Nice. She's asked a few times, so I feel like I should bring it. I should ask you guys. Can you tell us a little bit about foam glass? What is there a brand you used for that? I know there's Owens Corning or Cornell, or one of those have Corningware.
We actually haven't used it yet, but I'd love to use it. The product that we're probably going to use is Glavel. It's out of Vermont. So I know you can buy it now, but I think if you buy it now, I think you're actually buying like stuff that's being imported from Germany. So
I think I just talked to Rob at Glavel on Wednesday about a project I'm working on, and he was shipping it from Houston, and I thought it was a recycled glass product. So that may already be changing. So give him a reach out to Glavel if you're interested in that, because I think that's already on the improved side. He was quoting really what I consider to be very favorable pricing. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in that. It's a fantastic product. I'm really excited about it. And, there's a limited labor with that product. Obviously, the plate compactor is something that you wouldn't be doing with a comfort board or a GPS under slab insulation, but you still have to plate compact the crushed stone if you're doing a traditional under slab preparation. So yeah, anyway, that's a huge digression. Sorry, I got excited.
Lillian Marr asked if you can talk about venting your walls up and out through the roof. Did you need to calculate the net free area, or any concerns about connecting your wall venting with your roof venting?
No calculations. So we just have, there's this range screen, which is, just 2 layers of strapping behind between the weather resistant area, which was the Mento Plus on my house, and then the siding. So it's just creating this airspace. Down on the bottom, you have like insect screen or core vent or something that keeps the bugs and then the mice from getting in there. And it's just air, like being able to move behind your siding so that if you have a crack in a board, you have driving rain that's coming in behind your siding. It's not being trapped in this sandwich between the siding and your weather resistant barrier. And so we're just having this airspace, and it just connects up to the roof where we have that strapping under the metal roofing. So it's just air seeps in at the bottom of the wall and just rises as hot air does. And it just rises all the way up, goes up over the roof, and then there's a ridge vent on the roof so the air can get out there. So it's just a way of kind of like, it's like going running, with your jacket all zipped up and being all tight, and then like, opening the vent strips under the arms. It's just kind of getting rid of the moisture.
That's good. Doug Horgan had a good idea. Your EPS crown molding was a clever idea. Doug suggests Thermal Buck should make those, and as a product, insulating crown moldings.
Like a little pattern on it.
Yeah, exactly. Hans Bro asks if you can, with the Lunos ventilation system, can you smell outdoor odors? Do you get any transfer of that, or is it any different from centralized ventilation systems? Have you noticed?
I haven't noticed it. No, I mean, it has the filtration is not as good, I think, as in a centralized ventilation system. But and where I live, I mean, I'm out in the middle of the woods. There's not, smell the rain and the
fresh wood smell coming in on you. Come on.
Yeah, no, Christ, no.
Yeah.
We have scented candles everywhere. Don't worry.
Guess what?
No! Terrible air quality. Come on. I know
Can you talk a little bit about why you chose the Lunos system? I'm always curious about that.
Just because if we wanted to have a centralized ventilation system, I would have had to run this ductwork through my house, which the inside of the house is a very open layout. So it would have been impossible to kind of hide that. Plus, I didn't have, I don't have a basement in my house. I have nowhere to really put that system and fit it in.
Okay.
So it's just
How many do you have?
So we have two Lunas E-Go systems. So that's like the two units that Anna talked about that are connected. So I have
That's E2.
E2. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thank you. So we have there's 4 bedrooms in the house. So we have them in like 3 of the bedrooms and 1 living room. And then we have like 2 of those 2 pairs. And then we have 3 E-Go units, 1 in each bathroom and 1 in the kitchen. And that's like more than enough. That's like really, so we can run a couple of those on low. And then what we normally do is we kind of turn them down to low when we leave for the day. And then at night when you go to bed, we definitely pop them up to full speed, just so you're getting plenty of fresh air in while you're sleeping. And, to be honest,
So you have an in and an out in the bedroom, or you have an in the bedroom and an out sort of somewhere else and undercut the door?
So the units, let's say you have one in my bedroom and that's connected to a unit that's down in the living room, right? So the one in the living room will be sucking air in while the one in the bedroom is exhausting air. 70 seconds later, right, they switch over. Okay. And then, there's like a 1/2 inch gap under the door so that the air can move in and out of the room. And there's this honeycomb, right? There's this really heavy duty ceramic cone in the unit so that when the air is being blown out, it warms up that honeycomb. And then when you're sucking the air in that's cold, it's taking the latent heat out of the honeycomb and warming it up that way.
One other random question about Lunos then. How are the ones doing in the house you did that has the pool? Are they holding up?
I haven't heard from them. So the house that you asked about with the pool, it actually has a centralized ventilation system, right? And we just put the one E2 unit in the pool room so that the moisture from the pool room wouldn't get sucked through the entire house, right? So that's kind of separate. And I mean, as far as I know, I haven't heard anything differently. I don't know. Maybe Anna, have you heard anything from Peter and Cindy? Or no?
Nope. No news is good news.
Let's hope so.
No callback means it's working.
Yeah.
Is it a huge cost savings to go with Lunos approach versus, you know, an ERV or HRV? I mean, because you're not, you know, if you don't have the duct work, then it eliminates all of that. So are we talking, like, can you talk a little bit about the cost difference between those two approaches?
So the units that we have in my house are probably, let's see, 22, 21. So like $4,500 for the Lunas units, and you know, whatever time it takes to install them and wire them up, which is, I don't know, maybe $1,000, maybe a couple of $1,000 at the most. So for like a full blown, if we bought like a Cinder unit for a new house, it's probably like closer to like $8,000 or $9,000 for all the, you know, by the time you get the unit, the ductwork, the manifolds. I mean, you know, like one's a Volkswagen, the other one's a BMW. So it's, you know, but it's a much simpler, it's a much simpler installation. And I mean, there's one in the office where I am right now. And I mean, you know, I'm sitting with headphones on, but I can hear the unit running. So it's, you kind of get used to it. You know, it's kind of like a refrigerator humming in the background, but you know, if you have a centralized ventilation system, you don't hear it. It's just there, you know.
No. A couple of building envelope questions or comments. One, Drew noted that you don't have overhangs on either building, and that Frank Lloyd Wright would roll over in his grave. Any I know no overhangs is often a hot issue, but have you experienced any problems with your Mento wrapping the wall to roof intersection, and ventilated cladding, ventilated roofing? Have you had any problems with the lack of overhangs?
There are overhangs in my house.
Oh, there are, right?
So
okay.
yeah, that's if you wanted to go, you can go to like that's an Instagram post on Main Passive a couple of weeks ago that kind of like shows exactly how we attach the overhangs. Anna,
Okay.
at Oxbow, there are no overhangs there, is that correct? Or
Yep.
Very, very limited overhangs.
Yep.
I mean, personally, I love overhangs. I can't get enough. I think it's like, you know, well, it just makes sense, right? I mean, it's like kind of like keep the water away from the building to start with. It's always a good idea, I think. But you know, there were reasons that, you know, Oxbow was just on a very tight budget, but it didn't have overhangs to start with either, you know. And I gotta say that building had been there for 200 years. So, I mean, without overhangs.
Drew's comment I missed was specific to the gable ends, and just I think people in other parts of the country don't realize that in rural New England we often will do overhangs on the eaves but not on the rakes because money. Usually, I think it's mostly a money decision.
Oh, that was a style thing. We see that here as well. That, you know, on the gable ends, we almost never see overhangs on like 50s era capes over here. And I always think, I really wish that had some protection on that side of the house. But I mean, overhangs don't cost that much, right?
Right. Well, Scott in the comments, I think nails it. That overhangs are at two ends of the economic spectrum. Either you can't afford them, or you can afford enough, or you can afford to do it right, and you have an architect who doesn't like overhangs.
I like Dan Colbert's take. It doesn't rain on gable ends.
It doesn't rain on the gable ends. A somewhat related comment I wanted to follow it up with. Russ Chapman in Vermont says Jesper's door rooflet, is it holding up with the snow coming off the main roof? Would you do anything differently? He's got the same situation coming up at his house, and actually I have the same situation as well. So the mono pitch shed roof on brackets, is that working out okay for you over the door, Jesper?
Yeah, I mean, I was out shoveling my deck yesterday, and we got some heavy wet snow that came off. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much snow comes off that roof, man, and dropping down. Yeah, it hangs just on just fine. I'm really happy that I do have that overhang over that door. And then the other thing we put on the deck, I put like little grates in the decking where the drip line comes down, so the water just goes right through the grates rather than splattering off on the decking.
That's a good idea. Steve Bazek wants to get a fight going about foam. If we run out of things to talk about, we can come back to that.
I love Steve. Always good for a tussle.
Yeah.
Does he like foam, or he doesn't like? Oh, now I'm getting into it. Never mind.
I was gonna
say. We all know foam is useful. Some of us prefer to use it, and some of us prefer not to use it when possible. Carol said I took the bait. I only half took the bait, Carol. It's not. So a few people have asked more about costs and comfort. So just if you guys would be interested in getting away from the building science more, how do you sell building science? I know we talked about it a little bit. Aaron says, how do you convince a client of the value when the budget is forefront and the idea of return on investment comes up and it's like a 50-year return? So how do you convince people to go to these lengths, or do you convince people to go to these lengths?
I just think, I guess, I just don't really make a big deal out of it. I was like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, we'll build your house. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not like, oh, we're going to go out and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I'm just like, oh yeah, no, we'll build the house. And then it's like, oh yeah, I don't really push it. I'm just like, all right, well, this is what we're doing. So
they sign the contracts and then we sabotage them with building science.
I mean, or with your company name sort of maybe as a clue to what you prefer to do, like main passive house,
So, we did have a client that a self-proclaimed tree hater told me when we started this project. We had this project and I told the guy, I was like, hey, we got to cut some trees over here to blah, 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 make room for the parking area. And he's like, Jesper, you have my permission to cut every tree on my property. So, but to him, I just said, hey, we can build your house the way the architect has it drawn up, but, we can also build it like just a much better envelope. It's going to be much more comfortable. It's going to be more resilient. It's just going to be a better product. And what I say a lot of times is like, it's kind of like, if you're going out and buying a brand new car, you wouldn't go out and buy like a brand new, BMW from like 1985. You want to use like 2020 technology. You want to have like, you want the airbags, you want the climate control, you want the comfort, you want the safety, the health, all those things, you know what I mean? And like the way that 2x6 walls with like cellulose, with like fiberglass bats, that's like, it's just not current technology. It's like, why would you do that? It's like spend a little bit more money and get a much better product and pay less energy cost, and you're probably going to end up with the same monthly expenses. So that's kind of like my go-to thing, but I really don't push it so much, because I think if you have a client who's coming to you and they want to build a house, I don't know how many people are going in there and they're saying like, oh yeah, we're going to use like 2x6 kiln dried studs and we're going to frame it up like, 24 on center, and we're going to have the headers are going to be made out of like, 2x12, and we're going to do, we're going to have whatever you're putting into the house. I think, clients want like the space and stuff like that. So yeah, if they ask, I'll go into it, but I just kind of try to not make a big deal about it, and then we do what we want to do.
Good approach. Steve Demetric answers it with that if the customer sees value in building a better building outside of the traditional matrix of return on investment, there's no need to sell the upgrade. So that seems like a good approach. And then they're talking about cars now. So back at the very beginning of your presentation, I missed it, but you must have said something about this. Bill Robinson asks, what are the 3 things that make it resilient? So were there 3 things that you mentioned about resilience, or is that something that Bill's bringing in?
That's just a word I throw in there, so it sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Well, I think, the resilient in terms of like, the house not freezing, right? Super insulated and airtight. So just the house not going down, like, let's take an example in Texas. If the power grid goes down, you're not like totally screwed. So that's one thing. The rain screen, having it vented so that the materials last longer. The attention to air sealing so that you don't have like warm, moist air migrating through your walls and condensing inside of your walls and causing rot and mold. That's I guess those are the big things in my mind. Just that, yeah, it's resilient in terms of like, you're not going to die inside that building if you don't have power. And the other thing is the building's just going to last longer because we're paying more attention to the envelope itself. So it's not going to deteriorate as fast as it would if we're just kind of like slapping it all together.
I like to talk about European standards in this application. Like, I don't travel a lot, but I did get to visit Spain last year, or the year before, I guess. And I was taken with how things had been cared for generation after generation. And I think that your approach with your retrofit speaks to that. If you do pass your home on to your kids or whoever buys the home, the level of investment that you've input warrants a level of care that makes that initial investment worthwhile, regardless of the economics of it, because it's now something that's valuable to the environment and the world at large. It's not just a moment. It's not just a return on investment in your ownership and your lifespan. It's something that is part of the built environment until it's not. And it has that level of value in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think just, somebody said to me like, hey, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it well. So I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, if you're going to build something, you might as well do it well. It's going to take a little more money, probably a little more time, a little more attention to detail, but, it might make the difference between having it stand for like, 50 years or, 100 or 200 years.
It seems like you have presented on these 2 projects a couple of times at least in the past. And I'm wondering if when you're working with clients, newly working with clients, if one or both of these projects are examples that you share with potential new clients, and why? What do you point out here for them to learn from and potentially steer them in a direction?
I think we're lucky that people come to us probably because they know what we're doing. So we don't have to work so hard at selling it. But I think we'd like to get into more retrofits. I mean, new construction is easy. I mean, easier. But I think both Anna and I really like, it's just cool to bring new life to existing buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will say Oxbow is cool because you can just say, hey, go check out Oxbow, and you can kind of see an example of our finished carpentry, because we're called Made Passive House, but you don't really, think of us as like a fine finish company until you see those products. And Oxbow is really cool because you could just walk right in. You don't need an invitation. So that's nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's like a million questions on the list, and so Kylie might have to just like post all the questions on GBA and ask Anna and Jesper to just answer all the questions on a blog post afterwards, because there's so many questions about construction. I mean, stuff all the way back from the beginning. Someone asked if you put the Mento over zip on Oxbow. Is the Mento over some kind of sheathing at Oxbow?
So the Mento, we didn't sheathe the outside of those double studs, did we, Jesper?
No, I think isn't that just over the old band boards?
Yeah, and then the Edition had zip board on it.
And that was it. Then there was no Mento.
That was it.
Yeah.
And then we taped the Mento to it, so we weren't covering the zip with Mento. The rest was just old barnwood that we wrapped with the Mento.
And I think with the Oxbow, right, it was originally we were like, I mean, that project, we worked so hard to kind of like, just sell it for like, we'll do it for like $250,000, we'll put like, 2 inches of foam on the outside, and then we just kind of managed to kind of like roll it into more and more. So that Edition there was like just 2x6 wall framing, I think, with zip sheathing on it, right? I think.
Yeah.
And then, so actually the older building is much more efficient than the Edition.
That's awesome. There were some other questions too. I mean, while they're talking about framing, did you buy 1x2s or did you make your own?
We ripped them out of 2x6, right?
For I don't know if she's talking about the 2x2s that are on the inside of the foundation wall or the
No, it was
wall.
it was on the roof in between the strapping that ran the rafters.
Oh,
you had that
yeah.
lower section. That's where they were
ripped
asking
it.
about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ford Davis asks, he's new to these high performance European membranes and tapes. What kind of longevity do you expect against airflow and moisture? He's in the dry Southwest. Heat and dry air tend to kill adhesives. I know you guys probably don't have experience with the heat and dry, but what do you think about the longevity of these products we're using?
Well, they all have exposure limitations, so pay attention to that, like before you side and everything like that. But that's pretty much the extent of what I would know about that.
I will say that the tape being taped onto the membrane, it definitely gets stronger over time, right? So you tape it on and you can peel it off the next day, but if you come back a week later, there's no peeling it off. But yeah, sunlight and exposure will definitely break it down.
Do you guys?
What's
that, Travis?
Right.
Oh, I was just saying that's true of all materials. Everything's got a UV rating.
Yeah.
So
right.
there's nothing specifically deficient about Mento or the tape because of the UV rating. You just have to pay attention to it, like any building material product.
But there are different types of Mento that can last longer in the sun, so that's something to consider as well.
Right. Do you guys ever do open joint cladding? Is that a thing in your area?
We haven't done any, but I do know that I think Proclima, they do make a membrane that can handle that.
Oh.
And I just saw some. I was just going to say, I just saw somebody ask what was the roof at Oxbow, and it was just corrugated metal roofing, so screw down.
Yeah, I think we're probably only like a third of the way through the questions that Mike was pulling out of the chat box, and I lost the chat box about a half an hour ago, so there's probably even more questions. But it's unfortunately getting close to that time, and so I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on either. I guess for me, I would say either of these two projects, or do you have another deep energy retrofit that you've done that there's some takeaway that we get asked a lot about renovations, and we talk a lot more about new construction on here. So anything to impart on renovations, deep energy retrofits, energy fit from both of you guys.
Well, I think what we were trying to highlight here is there's so many different approaches to it. And I think really paying attention to either yourself or your client, whoever you're doing it for, and their needs in that space is going to make it that much more successful. If you can build out and avoid disrupting their lives, that's great. If you haven't finished the interior and building in makes sense, then go for it. But I think case by case is really important.
And I would just say the symmetry of the shape of the building makes a big difference too, right? We just we're working on this workshop this old barn that we bought in Bryant Pond, and it's just a rectangle with a square roof, and it's been so satisfying working on it because it's so, you can cover so much ground in a relatively short time. But if you had like this gingerbread house, it might be a very different story. So just another thing to keep in mind. And I would just say finally, if there's a place that these questions could be posted, I think I'd definitely be happy. I'm guessing probably Anna would too, to go in and try and answer them after, maybe not tonight, but in the next couple of days.
Well, I'll jump in here and say that going through the entire chat box, pulling out questions is probably not a great use of time. But if people have, lingering questions that they would like answered, then put them in the comment section of the blog post that I will put up on Sunday morning, and you can have a conversation over there.
Okay.
That'd be the best way to do it.
Yeah, so the replay will go up on Green Building Advisor, and all the people who watch it after the fact can also ask you all their burning questions. So
Right.
Don't agree to answer too many ahead of time. So, all right, any final thoughts from the Brew Crew?
I think we're good. I think it's okay to.
I'm so glad that we had this. I just want to jump in and say I'm so happy that you shed some light on a mistake that I made. So I need to right now go and edit my text, Jesper, about your house, because I learned something here tonight that I got wrong when we spoke. So
all right.
I think everyone that watches the show learns something. So that's good to have you in the mix, Kylie. Thanks so much to Jesper and Anna for joining us tonight. I'm sorry, I got super formal and British all of a sudden. You're Anna, not Anna.
I'm actually Anna, so you're good.
Okay.
Damn it, I was right the first time. Blame the Jew brew. This is way too much alcohol. Thank you both for joining us. You did an excellent job with your presentation, and you did an excellent job on both of those builds. Thanks for teaching me something tonight, and for everyone that joined us, thanks a lot. Have a great night.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Night.